Attire number 1 in WCW NWO Revenge on the Nintendo 64. We have Boss Fight Studios action figure of Ultimo Dragon from their Legends of Lucha Libre. There's no better reason to get it than it's the number 1 attire in that old game I played all the time. But he also wore this in several shows. Spring Stampede 1997, Bash at the Beach 1997. So an attire you see often watching old WCW. And you might wonder why Legends of Lucha Libre in Mexico if he's a Japanese wrestler. He wrestled in Mexico all the time. He traveled the world at this time, jumping around to shows. Heavily involved in Mexican wrestling. Let's check the back here. Small little bio we can read, mentioning the Dragon Bomb as his finisher. Maybe in Mexico he uses kind of form of the running power bomb or Liger bomb more than his Dragon Sleeper hold he made more famous in the United States television. Because this is supposed to be a Lucha Libre line, not a particular American line. So let's get it opened up here. I do reside in the United States, so that is kind of what I was looking at this line trying to get out of it. Also the carding, very thick and good, so if you want to keep these on the card, they are not flimsy at all. So we'll take a look at Ultimo here. Now this is their basic figures of this line, although we do get a little more movement in the leg than maybe a WWE basic figure, although they are switching to this little more movement in the basic line very soon. So we just have straight knee. I think there's supposed to be some boot turn. And we just have the up and down ankle with twist as well. But a solid torso, no hinge within there, but the waist does a little more than turn. He does get a little movement that way. But pretty standard on the arms, swivel and joint elbow, wrist. Of course the mask is going to block a little bit of movement, not a ton, but let's take a look at that mask. Just want to do a close-up for the mask, all the details with it, especially the logo lettering on the side. I'm gonna guess it says Dragon, but that's just me. But actually in the eyes and mouth, if you look, it's actually like that there's a mask molded around. You can kind of see the gap. So just that depth to this mask. Not only recreating the mask appearance, but his face, because you had to do so much to make the eyes and mouth actually look like him as well. Or I did notice his little dragon whiskers do kind of get bent up. You could probably heat these up and maybe form them. One kind of ends up lopsided in the box sometimes. But he has all his flaps and tails. Again, the chest piece well detailed, even a very small gold bit inside, just like the real attire. We got nipples. So pretty well detailed, except maybe one little bit here missing with red. If you look at real pictures of this attire, so one tiny bit missing. Not too bad, considering all the other bits here. Even on the wrist, we have all the colors, gold, this greenish teal, and the red. Does have one elbow pad. I think he always had elbow problems on this arm. That's a cool little detail that they included, an elbow pad. No alternate hands, he just has some like open hands that could hold accessories, so a little generic there just in case. He's not going to be able to do his folded arm taunt just with this kind of basic figure, but again, the price point on these is not so bad. Of course, that elbow pad is removable, and his little sash here is actually its own piece with these little bits on the side as well as his kind of sash. So that is its own piece that can kind of ride up. You gotta get it back down to the belt line. I guess because these razor sharp. Am I bleeding? I just touched these blades. Holy my god. Okay, watch your fingers on those. There is one right there. You're not going to be able to move the leg to the side a ton. They are softer. Well, actually, his pelvic piece is a little softer plastic, so you can still do kind of the kicks and things Ultimo could do. It just kind of pushes the plastic in on the torso bit a little bit. These are incredibly hard. These are not soft, the little fins. The kick pad boots are just plain black, which he did usually have. Maybe there would be a little detail with the shoe. I did wear this attire sometimes with some different colored boots, but I think that's just because he had so much ring gear. He just was traveling around. You're just going to see different looks. Maybe because he just forgot a piece of the costume or something, you know. How many boots can you fit in your luggage traveling around back then? So I will say with the Legends of Lucha Libre here, we do have another figure from the line, Juventud Guerrera. There is some scale going on, even amongst their wrestlers they're doing. Juventud much shorter than Ultimo, which would be correct. Ultimo is a little bit bigger, taller, heavier, cruiserweight kind of upwards on the scale rather than the low end. So that means he might be pretty favorable matching up with some other action figures. A pretty famous opponent for Rey Mysterio Jr. at the time, so he is a little shorter there with the WWE version. And we can steal that Mysterio's belt, the WCW Cruiserweight title. Gonna look real nice on Ultimo Dragon here. But his waist is a little thick, so even this WWE Elite belt can't quite reach around too easy. You'd have to really stretch it. Which is a shame, because he was actually one of them that would really wear it around his waist, wouldn't do the old over-the-shoulder business. But that does look pretty cool on him. Pretty on par height with Eddie Guerrero. They were the exact height, although we do have Ultimo's mask kind of factoring in here. I think the head is a little big on the Boss Fight Studio figure, because they're wanting to make sure they get all the detail with the mask, which comes through really well. So if that was the trade-off, had to be a little oversized. I'm all for it. We got Dean Malenko, which is close, maybe a tiny bit smaller. So he's sizing up pretty well with a lot of other WCW Cruiserweight figures that you can get other places. Here we have like a Booker T that actually is a little taller. So yeah, he's sizing up pretty well. He just has a pretty big head. I don't know if he was putting padding in his mask to make his head look bigger or what was going on. But other than that, the height and size, not too bad. He is a little thick around the middle. Here's another belt he would frequently hold in WCW, the WCW television title as well. And possibly that Cruiserweight belt was just kind of small. For the Cruiserweights, the TV title fits around his waist just fine. So man, I'm going to have a hard time picking which belt to put around my Ultimo Dragon, because he's definitely going to be having a belt, because he has many belts at this time. Of course, I have my decked out Jax figure, trying to recreate all the belts from his famous picture of him winning the J Crown, plus an extra title, plus the WCW Cruiserweight title in the photo, which you can finally recreate now that there's an actual WCW Cruiserweight belt. All 10 titles. Naturally, the Jax figures are bigger, thicker, but again, the head is pretty big on the Boss Fights one. He's almost possibly bigger than the Jax ones. But a much better detailed mask, I think, with the coloring of his kind of Japanese symbol on the side and all the other bits. Multiple colors. And a lot more detail on his bits on like his arm and pants and the full overall attire. Especially since the Joel Jax ones never came with his chest piece. Here's like the Japan exclusive one that had the cape with like a cloth chest piece that just wasn't quite accurate to what he had. Again, we're not getting a cape with the Boss Fights figure, but I think they're going to start doing kind of a more deluxe figure line with these. Ultimo would be a pretty easy one to do a couple different colors. He has a lot of famous attires. We could get an entrance cape out of the deal, possibly more articulation. So something to look forward to. Something I would still get. I tried to only get one figure of a wrestler, but somebody like Rey Mysterio and Ultimo Dragon with so many different costumes and masks. And I'm a pretty big Ultimo fan. Kind of the wrestler that got me into wrestling. Played the WCW World Tour video game as a kid. Had a lot of fun playing it. Went right to Ultimo Dragon just because he looked like a cool masked dude. And I was able to go home from playing that at a friend's house and turn on the TV and see an actual Ultimo Dragon match happen on television. Really hooked me right into wrestling right there. And like I said at the beginning of the video, famously his default attire in WCW Revenge should be the one I bought later to be playing at my own house. Pretty iconic attire. Mostly even just from the video game, not to mention all the matches he would have had on TV in this coloring. So for the price, tons of color apps. There's only very minimal things missing. All the extra bits actually do just kind of shape up just fine once you get him out of the package. So I'm finding very limited complaints here. And this is a figure I've wanted somebody to tackle for a long time, a kind of 90s Ultimo Dragon. It's great if you collect Japanese wrestlers, luchadors. You have a WCW collection like me from that time period in the 90s. He fits in so many places. This is really what I wanted to see from this action figure line, is some of the famous luchadors that you would have saw on any television, even if it was in Japan, in Mexico, in the United States. So here's one straight off the TV of the United States in this toy line that they're able to do. There's going to be no bigger audience than people that saw that are going to buy these. So I actually personally want to thank Boss Fight Studios and the Legends of Lucha Libre line for picking Ultimo Dragon, getting him, doing this exact attire. I couldn't have picked a better attire, I don't think. I mean, if you ask me, extremely standout. possibly just became my absolute favorite wrestling figure in my collection right here is this one. Adequate articulation even with their kind of standards. This chest piece is its own separate piece actually. It's not removable unless you kind of did a lot more with it. Not to mention all the other bits of molding and paint for every other part of his attire. An absolute stroke of genius, and I'll be watching this line very closely for more figures that fit into my criteria. Because of the wrestlers they're making, but because of the quality behind them too. And the price point being kept reasonable when they could easily turn around and say some ridiculous amount that a lot of these other places that are jumping into wrestling figures and stuff like that, overpricing things. This is just worth it on every angle. So open all my other wrestling figures that are kind of the late 90s and kind of WCW versus WWF time period. But I do like to get kind of international superstars like Japanese wrestlers here and there. This happened to fit both. So if any of that interests you, you'll definitely want to get subscribed and check out the next video or playlist. It'd be a great way to jump in. So hopefully I'll get to see you in the next video.